MSNBC host Ali Velshi is really good on the issue of healthcare. I've had massive disagreements with him on foreign policy and some other issues, but he's Canadian, and so he knows quite a bit about healthcare. He understands that the Canadian system is objectively better than the U.S. system. So he got into it with Republican Congressman Buddy Carter on this issue of healthcare during this outbreak that we're dealing with. Let's take a look.
We're about to approve something in the next day or two from Congress that'll exceed $2 trillion, which, as you know, would probably cover Obamacare and all student debt in the country. Are we cool with the idea that we should probably be spending our money on universal health care at this point as a medical professional?
Well, what I hope we don't see is universal health care, is Medicare for all, come about as a result of a crisis. I don't want to see us have socialized medicine as a result of a crisis. And I certainly don't want us to have socialism as a result of a crisis. There are people in need.
But Congressman, hold on. You know you're talking to a Canadian, right? You're talking to a Canadian. 50, I'm just guessing here, top of my head, 58 countries in the world, all of which are highly developed countries, have universal medicine, many of which were brought in by conservative governments. Actually, a conservative idea. In the United States, it was first floated as a conservative idea. In Massachusetts, it was done by a Republican conservative governor who's now a member of the Senate. Universal health care is not at all a liberal concept. It's not a socialist concept at all.
Well, unfortunately, it's a concept that doesn't work. And all you have to do is look into those countries that have it right now, and you'll see that they are not getting the type of health care that we get here in America. If you're sick anywhere in the world, where you want to be is the United States of America, because we have the best health care system in the world. We have access to prescription medications that those countries that you speak of don't have access to. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here when we talk about socialized medicine, when we talk about Medicare for all.
I mean, look, with the exception of cancer outcomes, there's no outcome in the United States that is better for a multiple of what other OECD countries cost. But if we do have the best health care system in the world, why have South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and Taiwan all handled this better than we have?
Damn. He sort of schooled him. You know, not for nothing, that video just makes me sad because we have somebody who's a congressperson who's representing Americans. And the stuff he says and the stuff he clearly believes, no connection to reality. It's just, you know, he's been totally propagandized. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure if we go and look at the amount of money he's raised from different special interest groups, he's probably taken money from health insurance companies. So I'm sure some of it, there's an aspect of corruption that impacted his worldview here. But I actually think he's sincere in believing what he said, which is, hey, the U.S. has the best healthcare system in the world, and this is where you want to be if you get sick. I think he actually believes that. I would change what he said very simply to, we have the best healthcare system in the world if you're like a Saudi prince or in the top 1%. If you're an average person, if you're part of the 99%, we certainly do not have the best healthcare system in the world. And as Ali Velshi rightly points out there, all the evidence points in that direction. All the evidence points in that direction. So I kind of feel bad for him, even though I'm also just like a little sickened and disgusted by the fact that he's in a position of power and he actually gets a vote and he could do stuff, you know, that directly affects all Americans. And obviously he would never support a bill for some sort of nationalized healthcare system, which we desperately need. So I like how he said, oh, we shouldn't have socialized medicine because of this crisis. Guys, in Spain, not all of their hospitals were public. They had many private hospitals. One of the first things they did in the wake of this crisis is nationalize all the hospitals. Why? It's the only way to have them up and running and successful during this crisis. It was a matter of necessity. By the same token, all these businesses that are coming to Washington right now, begging for a bailout, hat in hand, you know, temporarily nationalizing them is the best possible way to move forward. Because if we give them a bailout, what's going to happen? They're probably just going to go bankrupt again. They're going to go belly up again because the economy's ground to a halt. And we're not going to see business returning to pre-crisis levels for quite a while. So, I mean, the idea that like, hey now, let's not implement the solution because we have a problem. Actually, yes, that's exactly what we should do. We should implement the solution because we have a problem. That's exactly what we should do. And those countries, so I will say this. I think the more important factor in dealing with this outbreak is how quickly you lock down, how quickly you quarantine, how quickly people start social distancing. I think that that's more important than whether or not you have a national healthcare system. So I do think that's the overriding factor. However, yes, absolutely, countries that have single-payer systems and they acted quickly, they're going to fare the best. And one of the reasons is you're going to have fewer cases, but the cases that you do have, you can handle better. You know, places that have had previous outbreaks too, like Taiwan, like Singapore, they had emergency, procedures in place where they have the proper number of beds that they need and they have more ventilators than we do and masks. It's funny, he's talking about how we're so great. We're about to be totally overrun in this country. Lack of ventilators, lack of masks, lack of beds, lack of certain drugs. It's a nightmare scenario. So what he's talking about is just totally disconnected from reality. The most important thing in dealing with this pandemic, acting early, making sure you don't overburden your hospitals, having all the supplies and medicines that you need. And yes, it absolutely helps to have a universal system because we just covered a story. Somebody in this country got a $35,000 bill. $35,000 bill because they had COVID-19 and they had some underlying pre-existing conditions. They were battling lymphoma at the same time. But imagine getting a bill for any amount of money after having this virus. Imagine getting a bill. A lot of people can't afford it, especially at a time when we're going to have 30% unemployment, 20 to 30% unemployment, according to the Fed, not me. So this guy, I think he's delusional. I do. And it's really sad when you have people, like he seems to believe the things he's saying almost in like a religious manner. You know what I mean? Almost like there is no amount of evidence or data or reason that could get him to change his view on it. Because I'm telling you, if what we're about to witness doesn't change people's view on it, they ain't going to change it, ever. Doesn't matter that we're about to see, every hospital in major metropolitan areas likely get overrun. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. He'll still think like we have the best system and we handled it the best, even though that's going to be nowhere near accurate.